The invisible empire builders. Black women who created American enterprise. Act 1. The history we were taught. When Americans think about entrepreneurship, they think about certain stories. Henry Ford's assembly line. Carnegie's steel empire. Rockefeller's oil monopoly. Later, Silicon Valley garages and tech billionaires. This narrative has a consistent structure. Individual genius, technological innovation, massive scale, legendary wealth. The entrepreneurs are always white men. The industries are manufacturing, technology, finance. This isn't just incomplete. It's deliberately constructed to exclude the other story, the one about who actually built economic infrastructure in communities that formal capitalism ignored or actively suppressed. That story centers on black women, not as side characters, not as inspirational additions to a fundamentally white narrative, as the primary architects of an entirely parallel economic system that sustained millions of people through the worst periods of American racial oppression. These weren't feel-good stories about overcoming adversity. These were sophisticated business operations, scaled across states, generating substantial wealth and creating economic opportunity for thousands of people. And they've been systematically erased from how we understand American business history. Act 2. The foundation built from nothing. In 1865, emancipation meant freedom. It also meant immediate economic crisis for 4 million formerly enslaved people who owned nothing, had no legal protection, and faced a hostile economic system designed to keep them dependent. Black women responded by building businesses, not because they aspired to entrepreneurship, because survival required it. Formal employment was scarce, discriminatory, and exploitative. Wages were kept deliberately low. White employers could fire black workers without cause. The economic system was structured to maintain something close to slavery through economic coercion. So black women created alternatives. Laundry services became major enterprises. White households wouldn't do their own washing, but wouldn't employ black women in their homes long term. This created demand for external laundry services. Black women built networks picking up dirty laundry, washing it in communal facilities, delivering it clean. Simple service, but scaled collectively, it generated income and employment. Catering businesses served both black and white communities. Black women couldn't eat in white restaurants, but white society was perfectly comfortable with black women preparing food. The contradiction created opportunity. Catering businesses emerge, some growing large enough to employ dozens of workers and serve major events. Midwifery and healthcare filled gaps where formal medical systems excluded black patients. Black women became primary healthcare providers in their communities, delivering babies, treating illnesses, providing care that white hospitals refused. Real estate became another avenue. As black populations migrated to urban areas, they needed housing. White property owners wouldn't sell to black buyers. Black women became property owners and landlords, purchasing buildings in emerging black neighborhoods and renting to black families. These businesses shared common characteristics. They filled needs that formal economy ignored. They operated within tight-knit community networks. They provided employment to other black women, and they generated wealth that stayed within black communities. This wasn't informal economy or small-scale hustle. This was systematic economic development happening parallel to and excluded from mainstream capitalism. Act 3. The empire that changed everything. In 1905, Sarah Breedlove, who'd renamed herself Madam C.J. Walker, was working as a washerwoman in St. Louis, earning $1.50 per day. By 1919, when she died, she was likely the wealthiest self-made woman in America, with an empire employing thousands of people across the country. The standard story focuses on her wealth, her mansion, her symbolic status as proof that black women could succeed in America. This misses the revolutionary nature of what she built. Walker didn't just sell hair products. She created an entirely new economic system. Her innovation wasn't the product itself. Annie Malone had pioneered similar hair care treatments earlier. Walker's genius was the business model. She built a direct sales network of Black women agents who went door to door selling products and providing hair treatments. These agents weren't just salespeople. They were independent business owners, trained by Walker, supported by her supply chain, and empowered to build their own customer bases. At its peak, Walker's company had over 25,000 agents. Most were Black women with limited formal education and few employment options. Walker's system gave them entrepreneurial opportunity, training, and income that exceeded what they could earn in domestic service or factory work. But the system went deeper. Walker required her agents to give back to their communities. They sponsored scholarships, built community centers, funded social programs. The wealth generated by the business was explicitly intended to build Black community infrastructure. Walker herself donated extensively. She funded anti-lynching campaigns, supported NAACP organizing, and built institutions. When she died, her will established educational trusts and continued funding for civil rights work. This wasn't charity. This was systematic wealth redistribution, taking money from the broader economy through product sales and channeling it into Black community development. The business model was revolutionary. Create products for an underserved market. Build a sales force from the community you're serving. Train them in business skills. Require community reinvestment. And use the resulting wealth to build institutions that formal society wouldn't provide. This was a complete economic ecosystem, built intentionally, scaled nationally, and designed to create intergenerational wealth and opportunity. Act 4. The banker who saw the future. In 1903, Maggie Lena Walker became the first woman of any race to charter a bank in the United States. Let that sink in. Not the first Black woman. The first woman, period. Walker's St. Luke Penny Savings Bank in Richmond, Virginia, wasn't created to compete with white banks. It was created because white banks wouldn't serve Black customers. Black families couldn't get mortgages. Black businesses couldn't access credit. The entire financial system was closed. So Walker built an alternative. The bank started small, accepting deposits as low as a penny, hence the name. But Walker understood something profound. Access to capital was the key to everything else. Without mortgages, Black families couldn't build home equity. Without business loans, Black entrepreneurs couldn't expand. Without savings accounts, Black workers couldn't accumulate wealth. The exclusion from financial services was the mechanism that kept Black communities economically subordinate. Walker's bank provided all of this. Home loans, business credit, savings accounts with competitive interest rates, financial education programs teaching basic money management. But the genius went further. Walker connected the bank to her other enterprises. She ran a department store that employed Black workers and sold to Black customers. She published a newspaper that promoted Black businesses and circulated within Black communities. She founded an insurance company that provided coverage white insurers denied. This wasn't just a bank. It was an integrated economic system designed to circulate money within Black communities, building wealth collectively. Walker was explicit about this philosophy. She called it race pride economics. The idea that Black economic advancement required Black people to support Black businesses, which would employ Black workers, who would deposit in Black banks, which would lend to Black entrepreneurs. This was sophisticated economic development theory, implemented successfully decades before it became mainstream policy thinking. Act 5. The institutional builder. Mary McLeod Bethune is usually remembered as an educator. She founded what became Bethune-Cookman University. But Bethune was also one of the most successful fundraisers in American history, and her methods reveal another dimension of Black women's entrepreneurship: institution building through strategic resource mobilization. Bethune started her school in 1904 with $1.50 and 5 students. Within 20 years, it had multiple buildings, hundreds of students, and an endowment. How? Bethune understood that white philanthropy would fund Black education, but only on white terms, for white purposes, and with white oversight. So she played the game brilliantly. She cultivated relationships with wealthy white donors, presenting her school as training Black women for domestic service, and teaching them to be useful members of society. This was the language white philanthropy wanted to hear. But the actual curriculum was far more comprehensive. Academic subjects, business training, leadership development. The students weren't being prepared for domestic service. They were being prepared to be teachers, nurses, business owners, and community leaders. Bethune was running a sophisticated operation. Tell donors what they want to hear, take their money, and use it to build what the community actually needs. She scaled this nationally. Bethune advised multiple presidents on racial issues. She ran New Deal programs. She built a network of influential supporters. And she used all of that influence to channel resources into Black communities. Schools, hospitals, social programs. Every institution she built employed Black professionals and served Black communities. This was entrepreneurship of a different kind, not selling products, but building institutions. And Bethune was perhaps the most successful institutional entrepreneur of her generation. Act 6. The systematic erasure. Here's why these stories aren't widely known. The systems that made their achievements necessary also worked to ensure those achievements remained invisible. Jim Crow laws restricted where Black businesses could operate. Segregation meant Black entrepreneurs couldn't serve white markets, limiting scale. Redlining prevented Black business owners from accessing capital or expanding into new areas. But the erasure was also documentary and narrative. Historical records privileged white businesses. Archives collected white business papers. Museums exhibited white business achievements. Textbooks taught white business history. Black business records were often informal, kept in homes rather than offices. Lost when families moved. Destroyed when businesses closed. The businesses that thrived in Black communities weren't covered by mainstream business press. The entrepreneurs who built them weren't invited to speak at business schools or write memoirs. This created a systematic gap in the historical record. Not because Black businesses didn't exist or weren't successful, but because the mechanisms that document and preserve business history excluded them. The narrative erasure was even more insidious. When Black business success was acknowledged, it was framed as exceptional proof that the system worked. That opportunity existed for those willing to work hard. This framing obscured the actual story. These businesses existed because the formal system failed Black communities, and their success came despite systematic exclusion, not because of opportunity. The narrative also focused on individual achievement, Madam C.J. Walker's wealth, Maggie Lena Walker's firsts, while ignoring the systematic economic development they represented. This allowed the dominant culture to celebrate individual, Black entrepreneurs as symbols, while avoiding any reckoning with why parallel economic systems were necessary in the first place. Act 7. The legacy that never died. In 2026, Black women remain the fastest-growing demographic of entrepreneurs in the United States. They also receive less than 1% of venture capital funding. The pattern from 1865 continues. Black women building businesses because formal systems fail them, achieving success despite systematic exclusion, and having those achievements under-recognized and underfunded. But there's also continuity in strategy. Modern Black women entrepreneurs still prioritize community impact over pure profit maximization. They still build businesses that employ other Black women. They still reinvest in community institutions. The haircare industry that Madam C.J. Walker pioneered remains a multi-billion-dollar sector with significant Black women's leadership. Banking deserts in Black communities created opportunity for fintech entrepreneurs, building mobile banking solutions. The institutional building tradition continues through social enterprises, nonprofit ventures, and hybrid models that blend profit and purpose. This isn't coincidence. It's inheritance. The business models Black women entrepreneurs developed between 1865 and 1960 weren't just survival strategies. They were sophisticated approaches to economic development in hostile environments, approaches that remain relevant wherever formal capitalism fails communities. Act 8. The rewriting that's required. American business history is taught as a story of individual genius, technological innovation, and market competition. This erases most of what actually happened. The real story includes parallel economic systems built by excluded populations, community-focused business models that prioritize collective benefit over individual profit, and institutional development that filled gaps formal society created. Black women weren't peripheral to this history. They were central architects. Madam C.J. Walker built one of the most successful direct sales networks in American history. Maggie Lena Walker pioneered community banking decades before credit unions became mainstream. McLeod Bethune mastered institutional fundraising and strategic resource development. Annie Malone created the business model Walker would scale. Dozens of other Black women built smaller but equally sophisticated enterprises, funeral homes that became community centers, beauty salons that doubled as informal banks, boarding houses that served as migrant support networks. These weren't side stories. They were foundational to how millions of Americans survived and built wealth during the most oppressive periods of American racial history. The erasure of these stories distorts our understanding of American capitalism itself. We teach that markets work, that opportunity exists for those willing to pursue it, that individual effort determines success. The Black women's entrepreneurship story reveals something different. Formal markets systematically excluded entire populations. Opportunity was deliberately restricted, and individual effort succeeded only through collective support and parallel institution building. This challenges the fundamental mythology of American capitalism, that it's a meritocratic system where hard work and innovation reliably produce success. The actual history shows capitalism working for some and systematically failing others, requiring those excluded to build alternative economic structures. In 2026, this matters because we're still telling the wrong story about entrepreneurship, still celebrating the wrong models, still funding based on biased narratives about who builds successful businesses and how. Black women entrepreneurs prove that business success doesn't require venture capital, that scaling doesn't require abandoning community focus, that profit and purpose aren't contradictory. These lessons were taught over a century ago. We're still not learning them. The invisible empire builders weren't invisible because they failed to achieve. They were made invisible because acknowledging their achievement would require acknowledging the systems that necessitated their work. That acknowledgement is overdue. Not because these women need validation, their businesses succeeded, their communities thrived, their legacy continues. Because we need accurate history to understand the present and build a better future. The empire was always there. We just chose not to see it. It's time to look.